Hey, it's really, really good to be with you. So thankful and honored that you're here. Week 3 of our Influencers series. We're really just taking a look at Jesus, the most influential human who's ever walked on the planet, and there really is no close second. Studying a little bit about his life, applying some things to our own. And tonight, I want to start out looking at the number one reason we can lose influence. The number one reason and way that we can lose influence. When I was a junior in high school, I was in this student ministry, and I recognized a girl I wanted to start dating. It would have been like my first official girlfriend, I guess, if it all worked out. I was pumped. Finally, thanks, I think. It's like, yeah, I don't know why. And then, I'm not sure, but I mustered up the courage to ask this girl, like, if I can have her number, if we can start talking, and it was just totally awkward through that whole scenario, but somehow, like, she gave me her phone number, we started to communicate, and this relationship kind of evolved a little bit. We went on a couple of dates. First, second dates were just she and I, like, getting to know one another, and then we went on this third date, and the third date was a double date. I don't know if you've ever been on a double date before, but double dates are terrible ideas when the people that you have that are like your counterparts, when they don't know each other and there's like no interest whatsoever and they're just kind of there like, training wheels or something. That's what this double date was like. I invited my friend, she invited her friend, and we had an okay time, they didn't have an okay time, and it was pretty much a disaster. Well, a couple days later, I'm calling this girl, and we're not like together yet. We've not been labeled yet, but like I'm pretty serious. Like I'm in. I'm hoping that she's in too. Like she wants to be my forever. So I call her, and she clicks in, or she answers the phone. She says, "Well, hang on, I'm on the other line." She clicks over for like what feels like a long time, and then she comes back. She says, "Okay, sorry, I'm just on the other line with your friend." I was like, "Oh, you talking about the friend that we went on a double date with?" She's like, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, okay." Like, not okay, but in my mind, I'm like, what is going on here? She's on the other line with my buddy. My buddy knows clearly because I invited him on a double date. I didn't invite him on a double date to date the girl that I want to date. I brought him on to like maybe date that girl, and that evidently isn't what he had in his mind. So I said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." We keep talking for a little bit. I call friend, and I get to the bottom of it, and he's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was like, I'm kind of interested in her. I kind of like her." I was like, "Oh, okay, so you're dead to me now, friend." And what's interesting is like me and that girl like never worked out. And I have no idea where she is in life. Me and the friend that stabbed me cleanly in the back and called the girl, we actually like worked it out a little bit. We're friends to this day. It's like 25 years later. We're still buddies. But what I recognize, this idea was soundly involved in our scenario, and it's the number one reason you lose influence with someone, and that word is integrity. Right? You lose influence with someone instantly when you lack integrity, when your words and your actions or your words and your beliefs, they don't line up, right? Like, we're all hypersensitive to integrity, especially when it comes to relationships. Like, that's code. There's code. There's code there. You know better. He knew better, but whatever. We're over it. We're past it now. It's integrity. We understand this principle because we watch it so sensitively in the world. We're aware of it. Like we love to catch people who are living outside of integrity. For those of you who are baseball fans and you kind of follow like what's going on in the baseball world past couple of months, you know that the Houston Astros, they lack integrity, right? That's the booze. That's the booze in the room, is because the Houston, and some of you are like, what? What happened? What's going on? Well, if you pay attention to like the world, the Houston Astros in 2017 cheated. It was the season that they won the World Series. And really the only reason why they excelled the way they did is because they were untruthful. They broke integrity. And it's a big deal. Well, some of you drink energy drinks. And there's a brand called Red Bull out there. Red Bull gives you wings, they say. Well, I don't know if you know this, but several years ago, Red Bull was sued because when they say Red Bull gives you wings, what they meant by that was like you're gonna have mental focus, that you're gonna have all of this energy. That's kind of how they endorsed that expression, Red Bull gives you wings. Well, someone like called him out on that and said, well, I don't know about that. So they did a clinical study of Red Bull and found out that there's no wings with Red Bull. It's just sugar. So there's no focus, there's no energy. And so Red Bull loses $10 million in a lawsuit because they lacked integrity. If I were to mention the President of the United States today and kind of put that in the same context as integrity, listen, I don't even know your political stand. You're not going to know mine. It doesn't really matter. There's just some debate about Donald Trump and his honesty, about his words and whether they match his beliefs. Is what they say in the news always true? Of course not. But there's a problem there, that we're sensitive to anyone and anything and any brand that has a problem with integrity. Am I right? Well, we also know that if you have someone in your life, like maybe you've had a coach, maybe you've had a parent, maybe you've had an adult authority figure, someone that you've respected. Maybe it's even been a coach from church or pastor. Someone, and what they said didn't quite match up with their actions, right? They didn't follow through with what they told you, and they've broken trust with you. Maybe you have a friend. I've got a friend. Man, I love him. He is my bro. I would go to battle for this guy. I've known him since I was like 13. But this dude, I cannot count on. Like if he calls, he's like, dude, I'm gonna call you tomorrow. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not gonna call tomorrow. He's like, bro, we're gonna see each other in like a month. I'm coming to Phoenix. He lives in San Diego. I'm gonna come to Phoenix. We're gonna hang. I'm like, no, we're not. We're not gonna hang. He's this friend of mine that I love, but his words don't really go a long way with me. Like I know his intentions are pure. He just has a hard time kind of backing up what he says. He's that friend. You have that friend at all? Like the friend that you're like, I love you, not sure you're gonna follow through with that. There's kind of a breach in integrity with that. Well, whether it's a brand, a business, a friend, an organization, hey, we're all really sensitive to this idea of integrity, right? Here's the dilemma. Oftentimes, we're more sensitive to the integrity of brands and who we see online and celebrities than we are ourselves. Maybe we're more concerned with the integrity of the world than we are with our own integrity. Well, Jesus had like such a clear opinion on this. Out of everything that Jesus describes and teaches on, this is one that, man, I don't think he really minces words. He gets right at it. There's this one story, it's found in the book of Matthew, chapter 23. It's like if you were to just be there, I bet it would feel like someone got punched in the nose like 1,000,000 times because he's so direct, he's so straightforward with what he means. He's speaking to a group of people that are around him. It's kind of an audience, but he's got someone in mind. So if you imagine like you're listening to Jesus, but who Jesus is talking to isn't directly you, it's someone else. And the person that Jesus is speaking to is the people group. It's like the anti-heroes of the New Testament, right? It's the Pharisees. We usually, when you hear the word Pharisees, it's like, dun, dun, dun. You know what you're going to get when it's the Pharisees. So Jesus has a problem with the Pharisees. They are the religious experts. They're the ones that like stick to the strictest form of the law. They're legalists, religious legalists. And so Jesus, he's just laying it on these guys. I mean, he's going straight at them. And I was going to read for you a couple sections of what he said. You can track along with me. This is in Matthew chapter 23. Speaking to the Pharisees, he says, "But don't do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them." What he's talking about, what Jesus is describing with these Pharisees is they would develop their own rules, their own religious rules, and they would put them on other people to practice. It wasn't something that God wanted. It wasn't something that was in the Bible. It was just kind of from their own minds, from their own legalistic minds. And so they would put those rules on people. Two problems with that. One, it didn't come from God. But maybe more importantly, they just didn't follow through with it themselves. Like, they didn't practice what they preached, and Jesus took exception to that. Well, several verses later, he's like going off on him for a good couple of verses. Verse 25, he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites." Now, he uses this word. I think we've mentioned this word several times, like in church. We talk about it a lot because sometimes we are that, right? We have to bring up hypocrisy often because we are often hypocritical, or we're seen as hypocritical from the world. And so the word hypocrite is someone that's wearing a mask. It comes from theater. It's a person that's acting or pretending. So Jesus is calling this group of religious people pretenders. He says, "You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee." Now, hang on for a second. Zoom in on this. Every other section here, he talks about Pharisees, plural. He goes singular for just this one instance because he's trying to really reinforce how personal this is. He says, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. What is he talking about? Well, for the parts of religious worship for them, there would be dishes, there would be cups, and this would be a part of their ceremonies. And they were really big on making sure that these dishes were clean to perfection. But what Jesus is saying is hey, it didn't really matter how clean your dishes were, your hearts were dirty. Your hearts were filthy. And then he goes one more time, kind of reinforce a very similar idea. Verse 27, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites," once again. "You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean." You know, when they would bury people in Jesus' day, they'd bury them in these stone-crafted tombs. And of course, by the looks of them on the outside, stone would look dirty and filthy. And so they would assume that if you touched that, you would be religiously unclean, not capable of worship. And even if you looked at it, you would be unclean. And so they whitewashed them with lime, and they would look nice. Jesus is saying, and it has nothing to do with the tomb. He's saying, well, to the religious people, what your life is, what you look like, is one of those. You look really perfect on the outside, religiously perfect. You look and you're a person that really loves God. But on the inside, your soul is a rotting corpse. Jesus was serious about this idea of integrity and this idea about hypocrisy. He was so serious about this. In fact, he was so serious that I kind of wanted to build this illustration for you. Jenga, everybody's played Jenga, you know it. You've played it, you've seen it, you understand the concept of Jenga. Maybe you have some Jenga experts in here. You can kind of help me. I'll pull that one out here. The concept of Jenga, of course, is you're trying to build this structure as tall as you can without it toppling over. And so, the easy ones are always the middle. Yeah. No, I'm honored. That applause means a lot. So thank you. Here's this concept though. What I know about the typical high school student is that you're deep down hoping that this thing just comes tumbling down right now. That's what you don't want me to succeed. You don't want me to succeed. You want me to fail right here. And fail I might. Fail I might. All right. You get the concept, right? You understand how Jenga works? That's risky right there. That side's risky to do that. Yeah. All right, here's the deal. When it comes to your integrity, your words and your actions lining up, when it comes to the person that you're becoming, Jenga is this. The more gaps there are in this structure, the more likely it is to topple over. The more gaps there are in this, the higher it goes, the more likely this thing is to fall. Same is true with us. The more gaps there are in our integrity, the more likely our influence will crumble. Let me say that again. The more gaps there are in our integrity, the more likely it is that our influence will crumble. It's like this. When Jesus is describing what it means to follow after him, he has this integrity concept in mind for the believer. So if you're not a believer in the room, integrity is important to you. But for those of you, those of us that claim Jesus, we follow Jesus, integrity means something so personal to Jesus. Because he's the standard. If we claim that we follow Jesus, we put our hope and our trust in him, but on your sports team, the person that you are doesn't line up with the faith you claim, your language, your joking, your attitude, there's a gap in your integrity. If you claim that you love Jesus, as I claim that I love Jesus, but everything that comes out of our mouth is gossip and judgment, there's a gap in our integrity. If you follow Jesus and you're in a relationship and you're having sex with that person, there's a gap in your integrity. You're losing influence. If you go to the parties on Saturday night and everyone knows that you're a Jesus follower, but the way you behave there, you're high, you're drunk, you're whatever, there's a gap. Do you know there's a gap in your integrity? And the influence that you want to have with other people, the longer you live that way, listen please. Hey, the longer we live that way, the more gaps we have, the more there's just some questions about our character. It's just a matter of time. You've seen it. I've seen it. Let me share this. Why does Jesus care so much about our integrity? Why does Jesus care so much about our influence? Well, there's two reasons. One, Jesus cares so much about our influence because what he wants is like alignment with us, that we would know him personally the way we live our lives. But secondly, even if you're thinking like, I don't care if I have influence. Some of you might be thinking that. I don't care if I have influence. You know, one of the reasons why Jesus wants you to have influence, whether you want to have influence or not, is because he wants to have influence through you. Yeah, he wants, through your life, through the people that see you, he wants you to be an ambassador, to be a representative, to be like a walking advertisement for Jesus by the way you live your life, by the way you trust other people. You don't need to get on a stage. You don't have to teach other people. You can just talk and live your life the way that you would, and he wants that to be a representative or representation of his love. He wants that kind of influence through you, and when we live our lives with all of these gaps in them, we just lose influence with people, right? I don't know how many people you've seen in your life. I don't know how many people you've seen in your life that have lost influence with you. I've had so many that have lost influence. I've had so many of them. And I want you to know, I care so deeply about your influence. I care so deeply about it. That you have that in your school today, that you have that in college down the road, that you have that in your life. I care that you have that integrity. I care that I have that integrity. But let me just be really straight up with you. I have gaps. I have gaps in my character. I do. I'm probably better at hiding it than you. I have them. I've got greed. I've got selfishness. I've got pride. I've got lust. I've got all kinds of gaps in my life. But what I'm trying to do, and what I hope you begin to do more and more throughout your life, is that you begin to close those gaps, and you work on closing those gaps through Jesus. And he can help you to close that, to not live this fake, perfect life. It's not real. But when you make mistakes, and when you look at your life and you realize that there's some things that aren't quite right, you let Jesus mend. You let Jesus rebuild. And you know what happens when Jesus rebuilds a life? You know, he pours himself into you, and it's not as though that you're going to get to this status that your life is so flawless that nothing else would cause it to tumble. It still can. Listen, I've got a wife of 17 years, and I'm not losing my influence with her. I've got 2 kids that I love dearly. I know they look up to me. I'm not losing influence with my kids. I've got a job that I think is so special in a church that I think is fantastic. And I don't want to lose influence with my church, and I don't want to lose influence with you. And I want the same for you. So I've got 4 questions I want you to ask yourself, and you're going to go off in a group and you're going to discuss this together. 4 questions. I think they're really important. Let's take a look at these together. First one is, do people see a different me depending on the context? You're asking yourself this question. And if that's the case, if people see a different you depending on the context, there might be a gap in your integrity. Can people count on me? Like, are you a person that others can count on? If not, there might be a gap in your integrity. Does my word mean anything to people? Whatever I say, does it really matter? And the last one, do I hold others to a standard I don't keep? There might be a gap in your integrity. See, when we have gaps in our integrity, our influence will crumble. What I pray tonight for you is that when you get to groups, hey, you'll start learning and becoming a person that figures out how to close those gaps with Jesus. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for our students. Thank you for your word, and thank you for your forgiveness and grace. We know that we are less than perfect. We know that we're outside of who you call us to be, who you want us to be, but you love us nonetheless, and you've got such grace for us. I pray that tonight what we do is, hey, we learn, we're honest, and we allow you to close those gaps. We love you. We thank you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.